There's this really pervasive myth about modern dating. We kind of picture ourselves out there in this wild west of swiping and ghosting, right?
Right, the whole chaotic landscape of it all.
Exactly. And, decoding those absolutely maddening one-word texts. And we treat it all like it's just, well, chaotic weather, like we're in a tiny boat just getting completely tossed around by the unpredictable storms of human interaction.
Yeah, we think who we fall for or why our relationships just completely crash and burn is basically a roll of the dice.
Right. But the moment you actually start peeling back the layers of relationship psychology, that illusion of randomness it completely vanishes.
It really does. It's not weather at all.
No, not at all. We were looking at this invisible architecture. We're running on highly predictable, deeply ingrained legacy code.
Which is, frankly, entirely deterministic. And that's a pretty terrifying thought at first,
Oh, for sure. It's totally unnerving.
Because we walk around genuinely believing we possess total free will in our romantic lives. We tell ourselves we choose a partner because maybe they share our taste in indie movies or they just have a really great laugh.
Yeah, we build this whole conscious narrative around it.
Exactly. But beneath that conscious narrative, there is this massive subconscious supercomputer. And it's executing a survival script that was literally written decades before we even went on our first date.
Which is wild to think about. And honestly, that is our mission today. Welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. If you are listening to this right now, you are probably navigating the fast-paced, sometimes totally chaotic modern dating world.
And we are going to help you uncover the hidden frameworks dictating who you love and how you fight.
Okay, let's unpack this because our source material today is this fascinating document called Attachment Styles in Dating, and it introduces a concept that I am honestly obsessed with. It's called self-awareness etiquette.
It's a game changer, truly.
It really is. And to be clear, right off the bat, when we say etiquette, we are not talking about, holding doors open or knowing which fork to use at a fancy restaurant.
Right, this isn't Emily Post.
No, this is about the micro interactions of your nervous system. It's the etiquette of how we manage our own emotional volatility so we don't, accidentally detonate a bomb in our partner's lap.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Traditional etiquette was basically about maintaining social harmony in a dining room. But self-awareness etiquette, that's about maintaining neurological harmony in a relationship.
And the stakes are so much higher there.
They couldn't be higher. Because understanding the theory of attachment is completely useless if it just stays in a textbook.
I mean, if learning about this stuff doesn't physically alter how you respond to a frustrating text message at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, then it's just intellectual entertainment.
Right. The goal has to be practical application, which brings up a really massive pivot in how we actually get that real-world application. We're going to explore how to use everyday platforms to master this stuff, specifically Weddizer. Yeah, which surprises a lot of people.
Oh, totally. I know the immediate reaction from anyone listening is probably, wait, Weddizer? Isn't that where you go to figure out if you want buttercream or fondant on a cake?
Or to yell at a seating chart.
Exactly. But there is a massive shift happening underneath the surface of that platform. If you dive into their article sections, they have essentially built this stealth academy for profound, ongoing relationship and social etiquette guidance.
They've recognized a really crucial gap in the market. I mean, planning a wedding is a logistical sprint, sure, but navigating the dating landscape and maintaining a relationship long-term, that is an emotional marathon.
It's a brilliant evolution for a platform like that, because historically the wedding industry focuses entirely on the aesthetic of the event, right? They completely ignore the psychological infrastructure of the two people actually standing at the altar.
Exactly. And by building out this really robust library of relationship guidance, focusing on niches like dating psychology, emotional intelligence, and conflict resolution, they are acknowledging that the whole happily ever after thing requires daily maintenance.
Right. It requires constant active engagement with your own psychology. So let's actually get into that psychology. We know you, our listener, are probably generally familiar with the basics of attachment theory.
Most people have taken the online quizzes by now.
Right, we all know the labels. But I want to bypass the textbook definitions and get into the actual machinery of this. How does a pattern develop when we were literally in cribs before we even had language manage to hijack a 30-something adult who is just trying to negotiate boundaries?
Well, to understand the machinery, you have to look at the evolutionary biology of a human infant. I mean, infant is essentially just a nervous system wrapped in a blanket.
That's a vivid image.
Right, and they are entirely incapable of keeping themselves alive. Survival is 100% dependent on keeping a massive, capable adult attached to them at all times.
So the stakes are literally life or death from day one.
Absolutely. So the ancient's brain is constantly running this threat assessment program. It's asking, if I cry, does the giant keep me safe? Are they consistent? Do they ignore me? Do they yell at me?
Wow. And the answers to those questions don't just form memories, do they?
No, they literally dictate how the neural pathways in the brain are pruned and wired. That early environment sets the baseline for the nervous system's alarm system. And that baseline fundamentally is your attachment style.
So we aren't just talking about a set of beliefs or personality quirks. We are talking about physical biology, like how quickly your amygdala fires, how much cortisol floods your system when you perceive a threat.
Precisely. It is baked into the hardware.
Okay, let's do a rapid-fire recap of the players on the field, starting with the secure attachment style.
Sure. So the secure attachment style is the nervous system that learned early on the world is generally safe, my needs will be met, and people are reliable.
Which sounds lovely.
It is. In an adult, this looks like someone who is comfortable with both intimacy and independence. They can communicate openly. They can experience a disagreement without their body going into a total fight or flight panic. They have high vagal tone and can self-soothe.
Which is the dream, obviously. But then you have the anxious attachment style, and this isn't just someone who worries a lot about paying rent.
No. This is a nervous system that was trained in an environment of deep inconsistency.
Yeah.
Sometimes crying got a warm hug, but other times it was just completely ignored.
So the infant brain concludes what?
It concludes, I have to be hypervigilant. I have to scream louder and cling tighter, or I will literally die.
Wow. Okay, so fast forward 30 years. That same person is staring at a phone. Their partner hasn't texted back in like 4 hours.
Exactly. And the rational adult brain knows the partner is just in a marketing meeting. But the legacy software, that anxious neural pathway, it completely hijacks the system.
The amygdala fires.
The amygdala fires, cortisol spikes, their chest gets tight. To their nervous system, that unreturned text is a literal saber-toothed tiger. It's a threat to their survival.
And that manifests as, what, like desperate attempts to reestablish connection?
Yes, appearing clingy, over-texting, overly emotional outbursts. Sometimes even picking a fight just to get a response. Because to the anxious brain, any response is better than the void of abandonment.
That sounds exhausting. And then on the flip side, you have the avoidant attachment style. This is the nervous system that learned when I express a need, I am either rejected, shamed, or smothered.
Right. So the only way to survive is to shut down those needs and value independence over closeness. They rely entirely on themselves.
The avoidant nervous system is fascinating to me because they often look incredibly calm on the outside during a conflict, right? Like they don't care at all.
That's the illusion. Biological studies actually show their internal state, their heart rate, their stress hormones is often just as elevated as the anxious person's.
Wait, really?
Yes. They've just learned to suppress the outward expression of it. Their survival strategy is deactivating the attachment system entirely. When emotional intimacy gets too intense, or when a partner makes a demand, their brain hits the emergency eject button. Because to them, distance equals safety. They just withdraw.
Wow. And then, of course, there's the disorganized style, which the source material notes is the most complex.
It's a very confusing mix.
Yeah.
It happens when the caregiver was both the source of survival and the source of terror.
That is a tragic paradox.
It really is. The child gets stuck in a biological loop. I need to run to you to survive, but I need to run away from you to survive. As adults, this results in extreme relationship instability, intense push-pull dynamics, craving deep intimacy, but then completely self-destructing the moment it actually arrives.
It's like buying the newest, most expensive smartphone on the market. You have all this incredible adult hardware, right? Your career success, your vocabulary, your rational problem-solving skills. But when it comes to love, you are trying to boot up the entire operating system using, like, Windows 95 software that was coded by a terrified toddler.
That is a perfect analogy.
You plug in a complex adult relationship scenario, and the system just throws a blue screen of death. It crashes.
Yeah.
But here's my big pushback on this. If these patterns are formed in early childhood, are we just doomed to act them out forever? Are we just broken machines?
What's fascinating here is that these are patterns, not life sentences. That is the existential dread that attachment theory usually triggers, but the neurobiology gives us a very hopeful answer, which is neuroplasticity.
Okay, thank God.
Right.
Wait.
We are not doomed. You have to remember that neural pathways are just like paths in a forest. The ones you walk down every day become these wide, clear dirt
The
roads.
superhighways.
Exactly. Your childhood legacy software is a superhighway because you've been using it your whole life. But you absolutely have the capability to bushwhack a new path. It just takes an enormous amount of conscious effort initially.
Yeah.
The awareness of the pattern is the key to breaking it.
So we aren't just stuck, which is a huge relief. Okay, so we've mapped the internal wiring. But relationships don't happen in a vacuum. We take our messy Windows 95 coding and we network it with someone else's glitchy software.
And that is where the sparks fly.
Which brings us to the actual crucible of connection, communication and conflict. Let's look at what happens when these styles collide in the real world, because the baseline communication styles are totally divergent, right?
They're speaking completely different biological languages. A secure individual communicates to transfer information and resolve an issue, clear and respectful. If they are hurt, they use I statements, like, I felt dismissed when you made that joke.
It's an invitation to collaborate.
Exactly. But the anxious communication style isn't about transferring information. It's about over-communication and emotional outbursts. They are trying to regulate their own panic nervous system by forcing the partner to engage.
So it's not, I felt hurt. It's more like a rapid-fire assault of, where are you? Why do you always do this? Are we even okay?
Yes. They are throwing out grappling hooks, just hoping one catches so they don't drown in their own cortisol. And contrast that with the avoidant communication style under stress.
They aren't throwing grappling hooks at all.
No, they are pulling up the drawbridge. Their communication becomes incredibly minimal, distancing, monosyllabic answers like fine or whatever.
Right.
It is a systematic deactivation. And the disorganized style is just totally inconsistent and unpredictable.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What happens when an anxious person who escalates and overcommunicates gets into a conflict with an avoidant person who shuts down and withdraws? Because that is the nightmare scenario implied by the text.
It is the anxious avoidant trap. And it is a toxic, self-sustaining loop. And frankly, to you listening right now, I want to ask, which of these patterns do you recognize in your own past conflicts? Because statistically, these two styles are drawn to each other like magnets.
Wait, really? Why would they be drawn to each other if they are so incompatible?
It's a cruel irony. The anxious person is drawn to the avoidant person's stoicism, mistaking it for strength. The avoidant person is drawn to the anxious person's warmth, which makes them feel valued without having to do the vulnerable work of initiating.
But then real conflict begins. Let's break that loop down. Let's say we have Sarah, who leans anxious, and Mark, who leans avoidant. Sarah notices Mark is just a bit quiet at dinner, just the standard Tuesday night.
But Sarah's legacy software kicks in. She perceives that microshift in his tone as a threat of abandonment, so her anxiety spikes. And to soothe that anxiety, she needs proximity. She needs Mark to verbally validate her.
So she pushes. She says, "Are you mad at me? What's wrong? Did I do something?"
And Mark, whose avoidant software interprets any emotional demand as a threat to his autonomy, feels his own nervous system start to redline. He feels suffocated. His biological imperative is to create distance. So he leans back and says, I'm fine, Sarah, just drop it.
Which is the absolute worst thing he could do for Sarah's nervous system.
Oh, worst. Mark pulling away confirms Sarah's deepest childhood fear. He is leaving me. Her amygdala goes into full override. She escalates. She follows him into the kitchen, raises her voice, brings up old arguments. She's desperately trying to force an emotional reaction.
But to Mark, this escalation confirms his deepest childhood fear. Relationships are engulfing and dangerous, so he shuts down completely. He stonewalls. He might literally grab his keys and walk out the front door.
Leaving Sarah having a full-blown panic attack and Mark sitting in his car completely numb. They're both just trying to feel safe, but their methods for achieving safety are mutually exclusive.
It is a perpetual motion machine of relationship anxiety. And if we just stop here, it's a pretty bleak picture, but this is exactly why the text brings up the antidote, which is self-awareness etiquette.
Exactly. Having diagnosed the problem, we have to look at the solution.
Right. So let's define this concept. The source emphasizes that self-awareness etiquette is about being mindful of your emotions and respectful of your partner's needs. The core mantra here is responding, not reacting.
And the foundational pillars of this are huge. It helps you recognize emotional triggers, improves your communication skills, builds trust and intimacy, and crucially, it avoids those toxic relationship cycles we just talked about.
So what does this all mean in practice? What is the actual difference between a reaction and a response in the heat of the moment, like biologically speaking?
A reaction is driven purely by the childhood attachment style. It's an amygdala hijack. It's instantaneous. The stimulus occurs. Your partner rolls their eyes, and your legacy software instantly executes the defensive protocol. You fire back a sarcastic comment.
You bypass the rational brain entirely.
Exactly. Your prefrontal cortex is offline. But a response that utilizes emotional intelligence to pause and address the actual situation. It requires you to manually boot up the prefrontal cortex.
But how do you actually do that? When Sarah's standing in the kitchen and her blood is rushing in her ears, taking a pause feels impossible.
It feels impossible, but it's a mechanical skill. The first step is somatic. You take a deep, diaphragmatic breath, which stimulates the vagus nerve and signals to the brain that you are not being chased by a tiger. You buy yourself 3 seconds.
And in those 3 seconds,
You apply the etiquette. You name the trigger internally. My chest is tight because I'm terrified he's leaving. And then you apply the rational override. Is that true, or is he just tired? That is the difference. The reaction is screaming. The response is saying, hey, I noticed you're quiet. I'm feeling anxious. Did you have a rough day?
diffusing the bomb instead of throwing it back. I love that. But even with good intentions, people stumble. The text warns against 3 major dating pitfalls that derail this process.
Yes, and we need to detail these because they are incredibly common. The first pitfall is ignoring emotional patterns. Overlooking your attachment behaviors leads directly to repeating the same relationship issues.
This is the person who goes through relationship after relationship with the exact same catastrophic failures, but refuses to look at the common denominator themselves.
Right. They say, I'm just a passionate person, to excuse their screaming, or I just value my independence, to excuse their ghosting. If you ignore your own source code, you will keep subconsciously seeking out dynamics that trigger your unhealed wounds.
Because the familiar feels safer than the unknown, even if it hurts. Okay, what's the second pitfall?
Avoiding difficult conversations. People do this in the name of preserving a false peace.
Oh, the ironic trap of the chill partner. You think avoiding discomfort keeps the peace, but it actually prevents the open dialogue required for a healthy relationship.
Exactly. Swallowing your needs is a fundamental violation of self-awareness etiquette. It ferments into resentment. True peace is the mastery of rupture and repair, not the absence of conflict.
That is so true. And that leads to the third pitfall, which is highlighted as a critical point in the text. Expecting partners to fix you.
Yes, the idea that a partner can heal your unresolved emotional patterns.
Why is it so tempting to want our partners to heal us? I mean, we see it in movies all the time, the whole "you complete me" trope.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about personal responsibility.
Yeah.
True self-growth is a personal responsibility. Outsourcing that work to your partner is a violation of self-awareness etiquette.
You're turning them into an emotional hostage.
Exactly. A secure partner can support you. They can be a safe presence while you do the work, but they cannot slay your demons for you. You cannot hand them the remote control to your nervous system.
Which brings us to the core focus of this episode, actionable growth. Knowing the pitfalls and the goal, you, the listener, need a practical tool. And the text provides an action plan. 5 tips for healthy dating. Let's walk through them.
Tip 1. Identify your style. Are you dependent or distant? You have to diagnose the legacy code first.
Tip 2. Practice emotional regulation. The power of the pause we just talked about. Breathing and booting up the prefrontal cortex.
Tip 3. Communicate openly, without blame or criticism, using those I statements instead of grappling hooks.
Tip 4. Respect boundaries. Having mutual respect for personal space so the avoidant partner can regulate without the anxious partner panicking.
And tip 5. Seek growth through learning.
And this is where we heavily integrate the power of Weddizer. Because while many think of it purely as a bridal platform, the source explicitly states it is a growing hub for relationship and a social etiquette guidance.
This is where you get your practical toolkit. If you need to sustain personal growth, you need a centralized hub. You can use Weddizer's article section to dive into specific niches.
So what does that look like practically for Sarah and Mark after their kitchen fight?
Well, Sarah can go into the article repository and search for content on dating psychology and managing anxious triggers. She finds step-by-step strategies for self-soothing.
And Mark, he isn't going to a therapist right away, but he might quietly read a Weddizer article on communication strategies and conflict resolution. He learns how to communicate his boundaries without just withdrawing and disappearing.
Exactly. The platform provides preloaded scripts for the prefrontal cortex. Mark learns to say, my nervous system is overwhelmed, I need 20 minutes alone, but I promise I will come back.
That is a masterclass in self-awareness etiquette right there.
This raises an important question, though. How do we sustain this personal growth?
Right, because you can't just read one article and be cured.
No, neuroplasticity requires repetition. You sustain it by consistently reading and applying tips from expert platforms like Weddizer. You build a habit of emotional education to transform those dating experiences into lasting love.
It's the gym for your relationship mechanics. And the ultimate payoff for applying these lessons is profound. The source promises improved relationship satisfaction, better emotional control, stronger communication, reduced misunderstandings, and much deeper emotional connections.
Because when you strip away the protective armor of those unexamined attachment styles, you create a space where you can actually be seen and loved for who you authentically are. Whether you are single, navigating modern dating, or preparing for marriage, investing in self-awareness is the absolute key to lasting love.
I completely agree. So we started today talking about legacy code, the idea that we are running on obsolete childhood survival scripts. But if tools like self-awareness etiquette and platforms like Weddizer can help us rewire them, it leaves me with this final lingering question for you to mull over. At what point does our past stop dictating our future and our conscious, educated choices finally take the wheel in deciding who we love?